Are you crazy? You're going to miss your interview. Her best friend's voice rang in Aaliyah's head, though Jasmine wasn't even there. Aaliyah was kneeling on the Crack City sidewalk, one hand holding onto the arm of an old man who had just stumbled, the other clutching his drop cane. Around them, life rushed past, footsteps clattering, car horns blaring, and the faint smell of roasted peanuts from a vendor down the street. This wasn't how her morning was supposed to go. At just 22 years old, Aaliyah had finally landed the opportunity she had dreamed about since she was a teenager, an interview at Halston Technologies, one of the most prestigious companies in the city. This wasn't just any job. It was a job, a chance to leave behind the uncertainty of minimum wage shifts and late rent notices, a way to finally help her mother, who had been working double shifts for years just to keep the lights on. She had spent weeks preparing for this. Night after night, she rehearsed answers to possible interview questions in front of her bathroom mirror until her voice became hoarse. She had researched the company inside out, memorized names of executives, and even practiced her handshake until it felt firm but friendly. This morning, she'd woken up 2 hours early, ironed her one and only blazer twice, and skipped breakfast so she wouldn't risk being late. And yet, here she was, crouched on the sidewalk, watching shiny red apples roll dangerously close to the street, while the man, they belonged to Winsome Payne. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly from the shock of the moment. The man, probably in his late 70s, tried to move his foot, but immediately winced again. "My ankle? I think I twisted it," he said, his voice soft but strained. Aaliyah's eyes darted to her watch, 9:42 a.m. Her interview was at 10 o'clock sharp, just 2 blocks away. If she left right now, she could still make it, maybe even arrive with a minute or two to spare. But could she really just walk away from a man who clearly needed help? Her mind raced. This was the moment that could change her life. If she got the job, she'd finally be able to start paying off her student loans, move her mom into a better apartment, and maybe, just maybe, take her little brother on the trip to Disney World she had been promising for years. This interview was more than just a meeting. It was a ticket to a future she'd worked so hard for. And yet, looking into the man's face, pale with pain, she couldn't bring herself to leave. "Here," she said gently, "let's get you somewhere safe first." She slipped one arm around him and helped him to a bench a few feet away. He leaned heavily on her, his grip surprisingly strong for someone so frail. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done," he murmured, shaking his head. She forced a smile. "Don't worry about it. You just rest for a minute." For a brief second, she considered calling for someone else to help so she could dash off to her interview, but as she looked around, she realized nobody else was stopping. People glanced their way, some even slowing for a moment, but they all kept moving. It was like the whole world had somewhere more important to be. Aaliyah's heart tightened. She took a deep breath. "Sir, I think your ankle might be sprained. There's a clinic nearby. I can walk you there." "Oh, no. I can't ask you to do that," he said quickly. "You look like you have somewhere important to be." She swallowed hard. He was right. She did have somewhere important to be. But what kind of person would she be if she left him sitting here, struggling to walk, just so she could make it to a building on time? "I'll be fine," she said softly. "Come on, let's get you checked out." It was only a 6-minute walk to the clinic, but it felt like forever. He moved slowly, wincing with each step, and every time she checked her watch, the seconds seemed to sprint ahead. 9:48, 9:53, 9:57. By the time they reached the clinic door, it was already 10:12. Her chest tightened like a vice. She was late, really late. Inside, the nurse took one look at the man's ankle and wheeled him into an exam room. As they started to take his details, he looked back at Aaliyah. "I'm sorry you missed whatever you were going to. You didn't have to do this." She gave a small shrug and smiled, though her stomach twisted with the reality of what she had lost. Some things matter more than being on time. They chatted for a few minutes. His name was Arthur, a retired engineer who lived alone. His wife had passed away years ago, and his children lived out of state. He'd been walking back from a market when his bag tore and sent everything tumbling. "Guess I'm not as steady on my feet as I used to be," he said with a sheepish laugh. When she finally left the clinic, Aaliyah stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring at the tall glass tower just a few blocks away. She could go in, try to explain, maybe they'd understand, but deep down, she knew how these things worked. First impressions mattered. They had dozens of other candidates who showed up on time. Her chance was gone. Her phone buzzed. It was Jasmine. How'd it go? Did you kill it? Aaliyah hesitated, then sighed. I didn't make it. What? Jasmine's voice shot through the phone. Why? What happened? I stopped to help someone, she said simply. There was a pause. Then Jasmine sighed. Only you, Aaliyah. Only you would trade your dream job for a stranger. That night, she sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling. Doubt crept in. Had she done the right thing? She could almost see the version of herself that had made it to the interview, shaking hands with the CEO, starting a new chapter. But that wasn't the choice she made. 2 days later, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. Hello? Aaliyah? This is Arthur. I hope I'm not bothering you. I just want to thank you again for helping me the other day. I never got to tell you. I'm actually the founder of Halston Technologies. Her breath caught. You're what? He chuckled. I stepped down as CEO a few years ago, but I still consult and sit in on interviews sometimes. I heard about your situation from the front desk. Why don't you come in tomorrow? No suit needed. I just want to talk. The next day, she walked into the same glass tower, but this time her nerves were replaced with disbelief. Arthur was waiting in the lobby, smiling warmly. They spent nearly an hour talking, not about her resume, but about her values, her goals, and the way she handled herself. By the end of the conversation, he leaned forward. We need people like you in this company. People who see more than just themselves. How would you like to start next Monday? Tears welled in her eyes. I would love that. And just like that, the choice she thought had cost her everything became the very reason she got her dream job. Aaliyah made her choice. Her heart pounded, but her decision was clear. She slipped her arm under the man's, steadying his trembling frame, and helped him toward a bench just a few feet away. His steps were uneven, his breath shallow, but he leaned on her as if she were the only solid thing left in the world. Once he was seated, she crouched to gather his scattered groceries. A carton of milk, a loaf of bread, a bunch of bananas, and a small jar of honey lay on the sidewalk alongside those runaway apples. She picked each one up with care, brushing off bits of grit, placing them neatly back into an intact bag she had dug out from her purse. Pulling out her phone, she quickly called a taxi. She didn't even stop to think about the cost. Every second she spent here was another nail in the coffin of her carefully planned interview, but somehow it didn't matter as much as making sure this man was safe. You don't have to do this, he said, shaking his head as though the kindness itself weighed too heavy on him. His voice was gravelly but warm, the kind of voice that hinted at years of stories behind it. It's fine, she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You need help more than I need to rush right now. When the taxi pulled up with a low rumble, the driver, a stocky man in his 40s, jumped out to help load the grocery bags into the trunk. The old man moved slowly, wincing with each shift of his weight, and Aaliyah guided him carefully into the back seat before sliding him beside him. As the car pulled into traffic, the man kept sneaking glances at her. At first, she pretended not to notice, gazing out the window at the blur of morning commuters. But his voice eventually broke the quiet. You're too kind, young lady, he said, almost as though the word surprised him. Not many people stop anymore. Everyone's in a hurry these days. No one has time for, well, people like me. Aaliyah looked over at him, her chest tightening. I was raised and never ignore someone in need, she said softly. Jobs come and go, people don't. He gave a faint, wistful smile, but said nothing more. The rest of the ride passed in a quiet that felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. When the taxi finally slowed to a stop, Aaliyah blinked in surprise. They weren't in some modest, aging apartment block like she'd imagined. Instead, towering above them was a sleek, modern building with polished glass walls that reflected the morning light like a mirror. A doorman in a Navy uniform stood at the entrance, greeting residents with a professional nod. It was already 9:58 a.m. Her stomach dropped. The interview, across town, might as well have been on the other side of the world now. Even if she left this very second, there was no chance of making it on time. The driver helped unload the groceries, and Aaliyah carried him into the building, following the man into a lobby so pristine it smelled faintly of lemon polish. They took the elevator to the 12th floor, where she walked him into a spacious apartment filled with warm light and neat, elegant furnishings. She placed the grocery bags carefully on the kitchen counter, lining them up like she was afraid to disrupt the order of the place. "Well," she began, forcing her voice to stay steady despite the sinking feeling in her chest, "I should probably get going." "Wait," he said, raising a hand. "Let me at least take your name. I'd like to remember the young woman who gave up her morning to help an old man." "It's Aaliyah," she said, smiling faintly despite herself. "Aaliyah Carter." He nodded slowly, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than she expected, almost as though he were committing it to memory. "Thank you, Miss Carter," he said quietly, and there was something in his tone, a weight, a depth that she couldn't quite place. She turned toward the door, her heart heavier than her hands had been when she carried his groceries. She didn't know it yet, but this morning's choice, the one that had just cost her the opportunity she'd worked for years to get, was about to change her life in ways she couldn't imagine. By the time Aaliyah reached the gleaming glass tower of the tech company, her lungs burned from the sprint. The morning sun reflected so brightly off the building's surface that it almost blinded her, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts were a blur. Maybe, as she explained, maybe if they understood, there was still a chance. She burst through the revolving doors and hurried to the reception desk, her blazer clinging uncomfortably to her skin from the heat. "Hi," she said breathlessly. "I have an interview, Aaliyah Carter, but I was delayed helping someone. I'm so sorry, but I'm here now." The receptionist, a young woman with sharp eyeliner and a sympathetic smile, checked the schedule on her computer. A few seconds passed, her fingers tapping quietly against the keys. Then she looked up with an expression that made Aaliyah's stomach drop. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter," she said gently. "The hiring manager already left. They had a tight schedule today, and the position has been filled." The words hit like a physical blow. Her chest tightened, and her hands trembled where they gripped the edge of the counter. Weeks of practice, late nights rehearsing in the mirror, ironing her only blazer, all of it vanished in a heartbeat. "Oh, okay," she managed to whisper, forcing her lips into a polite smile even though it felt like they might crack from the strain. She nodded once, turned, and walked out as steadily as she could, the echo of her heels on a marble floor the only sound she could hear over the pounding in her ears. Once outside, the city noise rushed back. Honking horns, chattering voices, the hiss of a bus pulling up to the curb. She stood there for a moment, staring at the crowd that moved past her as if her entire world hadn't just collapsed. She didn't regret helping the old man. She couldn't regret it. But the sting of loss was sharp, sitting heavy in her chest. Pulling out her phone, she typed a short message to her mom. Didn't get the job. "I'm okay, though." She stared at it for a second before pressing send. Then she switched her phone off, not ready to answer the questions or hear the disappointment in anyone's voice, even if she knew her mom would be supportive. The next 2 days moved like they were stuck in slow motion. She went through the motions, making tea, folding laundry, scrolling mindlessly through her laptop, but her mind kept replaying the same scene. The old man stumbling, her running toward him, the decision that had changed everything. She wondered if she had been foolish, if maybe there had been a way to help him and still make it in time. But deep down, under the ache and uncertainty, she knew the truth. If she were faced with the same choice tomorrow, she'd do it again without hesitation. By the time Aaliyah reached the gleaming glass tower of the tech company, her lungs burned from running. She'd half jogged, half sprinted from the taxi drop-off, weaving through the mid-morning crowd, her bag bouncing against her hip. The sun was bright, almost too bright, bouncing off the building's mirrored surface, so sharply it made her squint. She forced herself not to think about the clock, not to imagine the hiring manager glancing at their watch and calling in the next candidate, not to imagine the opportunity slipping away like water through her fingers. Inside, the air conditioning hit her like a wave, cooling the sweat beading along her forehead. She hurried toward the reception desk, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. "Hi," she said breathlessly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "My name's Aaliyah Carter. I had an interview scheduled for 10 a.m., but I was delayed helping someone who fell. I'm so sorry I'm late, but I'm here now." The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly winged eyeliner and a gold name tag reading Chloe, offered a polite smile. "Let me check for you, Miss Carter." Her fingers began tapping quickly on the keyboard. The sound seemed impossibly loud in Aaliyah's ears. She tried to read Chloe's face, searching for any sign that this might still be salvageable. Seconds passed. Chloe's eyes flicked over the screen, her brows drawing slightly together before she glanced back up. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter," she said softly, her voice carrying that careful tone people use when they're about to give bad news. The hiring manager already left. They had a full day of interviews scheduled, and unfortunately, the position has already been filled. For a moment, the words didn't register. "Oh," Aaliyah said, her voice almost inaudible. She gripped the edge of the counter, as if it could anchor her to something steady. She had known this might happen the moment she stepped into that taxi with the old man, but hearing it confirmed still hit like a punch to the chest. "I understand," she added quickly, forcing her lips into something that resembled a smile. She didn't want to cry here. Not in front of strangers, not in the sleek, glass-walled lobby where everyone seemed so sure of themselves. She turned and began walking toward the doors, her heels echoing in the vast space. Each step sounded too loud, as though they were announcing her failure to everyone in the building. The moment the revolving doors closed behind her, the city's chaos swallowed her up again. The honking horns, the low rumble of buses, the buzz of voices from people rushing to their own appointments. She stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, staring at the moving crowd. Her chest was tight, but not from running anymore. The weight of it pressed down until she felt hollow inside. She didn't regret stopping to help the old man. She knew that without question. But that didn't erase the ache in her stomach or the sting behind her eyes. She had worked so hard, prepared so carefully, and in less than 30 seconds, it had all been taken off the table. Pulling her phone from her bag, she typed a short message to her mom. Didn't get the job. "I'm okay, though." Her thumb hovered over the send button for a few seconds before she finally tapped it. She knew what would come next. Her mom's gentle reassurance that something better was out there. Her quiet pride that Aaliyah had chosen kindness over ambition. And she appreciated that. But she also knew that hearing it right now might make her cry. So before the reply could come through, she powered the phone off. The walk back to the subway felt longer than usual. Every step seemed heavier, her shoes rubbing slightly against her heels. She caught her reflection in the shop window and almost didn't recognize herself. Blazer slightly wrinkled from the sprint, hair frizzing in the humidity, eyes dull with disappointment. The next 2 days passed in slow motion. On the first morning, she made herself a cup of tea, but forgot about it until it went cold on the counter. She sat on the couch for hours with her laptop open, staring at job listings but barely clicking any of them. Her mind kept wandering back to the moment she'd seen the old man stumble, the groceries spilling across the sidewalk, the way his hand had trembled when she helped him up. She thought about what might have happened if she'd walked past. Would someone else have stopped? Or would he have been left there, struggling alone? The thought made her shudder. That night, she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while shadows from passing cars moved across the walls. A small, insistent voice whispered that maybe she'd been foolish, that she could have called someone else to help, or at least hurried more, or taken a man only part way before rushing to her interview. She tried to push that voice away, but it kept coming back. On the second day, the doubt softened, replaced by a quiet conviction. She knew herself well enough to admit the truth. If she were faced with the same choice again, she wouldn't hesitate. She'd help. She could live with losing an interview. She couldn't live with the thought of walking away from someone in need. Still, there was a heaviness that wouldn't lift. Her mom noticed it when they spoke on the phone that evening. "You sound tired, baby," she said gently. "I'm fine," Aaliyah replied, forcing a lightness into her tone. "Just thinking a lot. About the job? About everything." She paused. I know I did the right thing. It just hurts that it cost me so much. Her mom's voice was soft but certain. Doing the right thing always costs something, Aaliyah, but also pays you in ways you can't see yet. Aaliyah wanted to believe that. She wanted to believe that there was a reason this had happened. That giving up something so important for a stranger wasn't just a loss, but the start of something she couldn't yet understand. But for now, all she could do was wait. The following Monday morning, the air felt different. Aaliyah stood outside the towering glass building of Donovan Technologies, the sun catching the mirrored panels like a beacon of possibility. But this time, she wasn't here as a nervous interviewee clutching a resume. She was here as an employee, a newly hired junior project coordinator, handpicked by the CEO himself. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what had happened over the past week. It still felt surreal. Just 7 days earlier, she had walked away from this place crushed, believing her chance was gone forever. And now, she was walking into the same doors, but on an entirely different path. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed under warm lighting, its high ceilings echoing with a faint hum of conversation. People in tailored suits and smart dresses crossed the space with purpose, but more than a few slowed their steps when they noticed her. Aaliyah could feel the curious glances. After all, it wasn't every day the CEO personally escorted someone into the building. And there he was, Richard Donovan himself, standing near the reception desk, not as the frail old man she had helped on the sidewalk, but as a commanding leader of one of the world's most successful tech companies. His suit was sharp, his posture confident, but the kindness in his eyes was the same as the day she had met him. "Aaliyah," he greeted, striding toward her with a smile that was both warm and reassuring. "Welcome to your new home." She felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you, Mr. Donovan. I'm still trying to believe this is real." Richard chuckled. "Believe it, and call me Richard. I've been telling everyone about you. You're exactly the kind of person I want in my company. Someone who leads with heart. Skills can be taught. Compassion? That's rare." He walked her through the open concept workspace, sleek white desks, glass-walled conference rooms, greenery tucked into every corner. As they passed, employees offered polite nods or whispered to each other, clearly intrigued. One young man even mouthed, "That's her," before ducking his head back to his computer. By lunchtime, Aaliyah had met her new team, learned about her role, and even contributed a few ideas during a brainstorming session. It wasn't just about fitting in. She could already see herself growing here. Weeks passed, and she found herself thriving. Every project she worked on taught her something new. Every challenge made her sharper. But there was something else, something she hadn't expected. Her story started circulating inside the company. It first appeared in the internal newsletter, under the headline, "Kindness at the Crosswalk, How One Employee's Heart Inspired Us All." From there, it became part of the company's onboarding training, a reminder that Donovan Technologies value people as much as profit. One afternoon, as she walked to the break room, she overheard two new hires talking. "That's her," one whispered. "The woman who gave up her interview to help Mr. Donovan." "Wow," the other replied. "That's actually inspiring." Aaliyah didn't say anything, but she couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. Months later, during the company's annual staff appreciation event, Richard took the stage. The massive auditorium was filled with hundreds of employees, the buzz of conversation fading as the CEO began to speak. He told their story, from his perspective, how he had fallen on the sidewalk that day, struggling to hold on to his groceries, how dozens of people walked by, too busy to stop, and how one young woman didn't hesitate, even when it cost her something important. "In a world where everyone's in a hurry," Richard said, his voice carrying through the room, "Aaliyah reminded me that the right person will always choose people over schedules. That's the kind of leader I want here." The crowd erupted in applause. People stood. Some even whistled. Aaliyah sat there, blinking back tears, her heart pounding. She had never liked being the center of attention, but this wasn't about pride. It was about gratitude. When Richard gestured toward her, the spotlight swung across the room, landing squarely on her. Her colleagues turned, smiling, clapping, some giving her a thumbs up. For a moment, She was transported back to that morning. The rush, the fall, the decision she had made without thinking. Back then, it felt like a loss. Now, she realized it had been the first step towards something far greater than she could have imagined. After the event, co-workers she barely knew came up to shake her hand. "You've inspired me," one woman said. Another added, "I've been so focused on deadlines. I forgot what's really important." Thank you. That night, Aaliyah sat by her apartment window, city lights twinkling outside. She thought about how quickly life could turn. One choice, one moment of compassion, had rewritten her future. Helping that man hadn't been part of her plan. Missing the interview had felt like failure. But life, she realized, had a way of rewarding the choices that came from the heart. She didn't just have a job now, she had a purpose. And every time she saw Richard in the hallways, she remembered his words. You can teach skills, but you can't teach compassion. Because sometimes, the best opportunities don't come from being on time. They come from being there when it truly matters.